Uh, Hello everyone. Welcome to the Parallel Cinema Club's discussion on the documentary film Shoah. And I guess we can start off with a bunch of first impressions. Vishal.
So this is, uh, I think Roger Ebert put it very aptly when he said that this film is beyond rating. So that is also probably my. I don't think I can say anything better. It's a stunning experience, and it's difficult to watch not because of its length, just because of what it was. And the most important film as part of the creation. And I hope everyone, whoever is the film, I hope they liked it, or at least did something to them.
And Nikhil, okay. All right, I'll go ahead with my first impressions at least. I thought it was like a very unique and ambitious documentary that succeeded in what it set out to do. It was like as a historical document, or you know, we see the witnesses uh, of the genocide, like uh, whether they are, we see the survivors' testimonies, we listen to the perpetrators, beating around the bush, and we also listen to bystanders who range from kind of ambivalence to like gladness that the genocide happened, and it was quite saddening and infuriating to watch this whole documentary throughout the 9 hours. And yeah, I guess it's a really good documentary. I guess that's all I can say for now. Um, so moving on to these production details, like it took like I believe this Showa took 11 years. Just one important thing which I wanted to get off in the start itself. Uh, the word Showa means a great catastrophe, and Claude Lanzmann, the documentary filmmaker who made this, he did not want to use the word the Holocaust because it has an implication of sacrifice, and uh, and obviously the genocide was not a sacrifice from the Jewish side, and they were for it was forcefully imposed on them, and uh, and there are a lot of and there is a completely different implication them because of the different meanings of the word, and the word Shoah has been used more widely ever since this documentary has been made, which is a testament to the documentary's influence. Um, so this documentary took like
Also, also, it just uh, calling it something which is akin to a Holocaust is just an easy title to have. Making it calling it Shoah makes it much more immediately it gets your attention. So not necessarily a title or as in nobody probably had the word before. I don't know, just that's my guess. So the title Showa is also creatively much more interesting option.
Doesn't Shoah mean a concentration camp? Hello.
I don't know.
yeah. You got cut a moment over there. Can you repeat yourself, Nikhil?
Doesn't Shoah mean a concentration camp?
Um. Okay, I'll
I
check it
mean,
up
it's
once
just
again.
a
But
genuine question. I'm not really sure.
hmm,
I didn't really look up the translation of it.
um, I believe the origin of the word is a catastrophe or a great disaster, and
Mm-hmm.
it has been used to describe what went on during the genocide. Like,
Okay. So, a catastrophe is a direct translation of Shoah. Okay.
yeah, yeah, it's a Hebrew word. It
Okay.
literally means
Thank you.
catastrophe. And Holocaust is a burnt sacrificing which I believe the Jewish religion offers to God,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why Claude Lanzmann did not appreciate or like the term sure the Holocaust.
Oh, that's a very interesting title. By the way, when this documentary was actually recommended by Vishal, and when I watched it for the curation, it was absolutely mind-boggling. What struck me the most was, I mean, particularly with any documentarian um, in the observational regime, it mostly he mostly has to structure the narrative with the most, the utmost truthfulness, and the multi-dimensional historiography is what amazed me. But yeah, Kritik, if you're fine with it, can you direct the conversation to Vishal to, in some sense, elaborate on the reason he picked a 9-hour documentary?
Yeah, sure, we can go ahead with as to why this film was chosen for this week.
Uh, Actually, it's not a difficult decision to take in terms of uh, how it fits into the theme. It's an easy fit into the theme. Uh,
True.
s- so I think when I would repeat myself, I've said this. I think I've said this on multiple occasions to Nikhil also. When Roger
Mhm.
Ebert said that this film is beyond rating, he meant something, right?
Mhm.
It's
Even
like if
Simone de Beauvoir holds it with high regard. She's one
huh?
of the most leading. She's one of the leading feminists.
Who?
Simone de Beauvoir.
Okay.
Mm.
So even Kritik rightly pointed out that it's also this is also film which is also this professor who cries in the film, right? He also said like I there is a this is, you're doing it for the right reasons. So
Mhm.
it's supposed to be a historical document. It's
Mhm.
and if it is an historical document and an important historical document,
Mhm.
then it should be consumed like a document is supposed to be. So that's my thought. That's a thought on a philosophical level.
Mhm.
Generally, the film, and if we just talk about the film, right, it doesn't feel like a talking head film, which is
Mm.
which is easy to do when you when you make a film about facts, and these are cold facts,
Mm.
facts which probably you can't really argue with. Not probably you
Mm.
can't really argue with, but it also doesn't become so poetic that you lose interest in the film. The film never wavers from what it is doing.
Mm.
So, and in spite of it being such a long film, they uh, for example, the thing that really one of the decisions that they took is that so if somebody speaks something in a particular language, the
Mhm.
translator's version is also being shown on screen. So the best thing to do is like cut out one of the versions, right? Just remove the
Mm.
translator's version or do a subtitling of whatever this person who's being interviewed. You can just subtitle his lines. But
Mhm.
because this is a historical document and that the facts cannot be argued, that there is
Mhm.
nothing lost in translation, or the
Mhm.
filmmaker has subverted facts to get away
Mhm.
from that. You could easily have cut probably an hour from the film, right? So,
True.
but they still took that call. No, no, we will do it, and probably it was not even a point of discussion because it is the right thing to do. So the film is. So I am not one of those people who will select something just because it is historically accurate, historically important to watch.
Mhm.
It has to work on all levels, right? So, but this film does work on all levels and goes beyond. So
Mhm.
that is the reason why members would watch it. But
Mhm.
it is not our job to make people watch films. It is our job to select the right kind of films.
That's true. That's true. But speaking of the director himself, um, uh, it seems like he has dwelt a lot on the Jewish condition during the Nazi regime. But Shoah stood out, and additionally, there was a follow-up to Shoah. It was a 4-hour documentary, I suppose. Shoah, Four Sisters. It is something on those title stands something on those grounds. So this is a very unique choice, given that his filmography uh, touches various aspects of this. I mean, in extension, why did you feel this particular film fits well and not any of his other uh, from his filmography?
So, is this question directed towards me because the
Yeah,
audience?
particularly because you recommend film, but in addition, I didn't really know about Showa before you recommended it. So, I mean, this was a question that I had when I was writing up the list.
Yeah, because see, I have not really seen any of Claude Lanzmann's work.
Hmm.
I came across this film because I was reading up a few years back. I was reading about uh, Schindler's List, which I at that point thought is the definitive film about Auschwitz
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
the Holocaust, and it still
Hmm.
stands. It's not not on top of my list, but it is up there.
Hmm.
So I came across this film because I read that something was copied from Shoah, the film. So I was
Oh.
very intrigued about I mean, it did not really. The idea that Spielberg would copy did not really sit with me. So
Uh-huh.
I thought that okay, let me check this out. I had no idea that this is a 9 hour film, 9 hour
Hmm.
documentary. But once you sit on it, I think when I saw it for the first time, I did not sit through it. I only saw the first half because
Hmm.
I found it very difficult to sit through. Even now, when I saw it again, I found it very difficult to sit through. Not because it is
Hmm.
wrong, it's just it's difficult. It's difficult, and
True.
simple fact, cold fact, if it is so difficult to sit through for me, just listening to these people talk, how difficult
Hmm.
must that part of their lives when they I mean it's unimaginable, right? What they had to
True.
go through,
True. True.
and
True.
let's say the only reason something like that would not happen again probably is because it's already happened and the world is better off. At least we hope so.
Mm.
So uh, it's it's one of a kind, right? Like you rightly said, it's one of a kind, and uh, if the club should be ideally showing one of a kind films, recommending one of a
That's
kind films. That is my ultimate. That's always been my ultimate aim. And the film works on every possible level. There is nothing. I mean, not from my point of view. I can't. I don't really feel that the film is wanting in any which way. Also, uh, it's Not that a work of art is any work of art is above criticism, but sometimes the scope of some of these works, these great works of art, if you feel like, am I even qualified to criticize it? So that is this is that kind of film. Though I would not stop to criticize it, I'm just saying it's a massive film.
True,
It's a film which will stay as long as cinema is there. It will stay with us.
true, true. Kritik?
Yeah,
Yeah.
quickly, just to, I'd like to continue the conversation on why do you think, or at least what were the implications of only we getting the subtitles for the translator when the translator is speaking instead of the person being interviewed, because that's a very important choice which he made somewhere in the process.
Hmm.
So, do you have an answer, or are you asking this question?
I'm asking, what do you think are the implications of that? And yeah,
I do not know because I've not read anything to that fact. But I feel like when you're presenting something which, so when you present a film like this, you want to be objective, but obviously you are on the side of you are on a side, right? You're not on the side of the perpetrators. Obviously, you would want to give them a fair chance, but you're on somebody's side. So when you are on a particular side, you cannot have somebody come up to you and say, "Oh, maybe, but there was something lost in translation," because you must have asked something, they must have answered something, and the translator would have said something else. How would we know? What did you ask? So where is that footage? So that sort of question can come up. So to not have that dangling over their head. Not that anybody is going to come and ask them these questions, but just probably to not give anybody any chance to question it. Because when something like this comes out, the first reaction is always that this is a propaganda thing, right? Okay, the other
Hmm.
side is doing some sort of propaganda, and it may be, who knows? Maybe it is funded by
One
people.
tiny slip and it might, justify that.
Correct. And it might be funded by someone, right? It's totally possible. It's not. I'm not saying this is a philanthropic film. It is a
Mhm.
definitely a philanthropic film from the point of view of the filmmaker, but who funds it, we never know. There are always people who have vested interests. That might be true, but the filmmaker, all he can do is be as objective as possible. And I think it was a very. I would probably would not have even thought of it, but the fact that they thought of it is hats off to them. It's a very small. It seems like a very small decision to take, but when you think about it, it's massive. It's massive. It doesn't give your opponents any scope to argue. Just this simple filmmaking tool. Like we will also have the translator. We will not subtitle anything. We will have the translator translating it. So it's quite massive in my view. It's quite. I would, let's say, if I was in his place, probably I would not have thought of.
Two additional points I wanted to make to that. One, retrospectively, it seems like the missing picture is a stark contrast of Shoah, particularly in the aspect of the director Ritipan being objective. Second.
So, but Ridipan went through something. Claude Lanzmann didn't. So, or at least I don't know of it. So you can't probably really blame Ridipan.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry. Ritipan taking a more emotional point of view, despite presenting us with the facts. I mean, uh, uh, of his sufferings. It would be, in some sense, questionable to call it facts because it's a POV. But here, um, uh, you know, he refuses to take that stance, and it's mostly a documentation, a historical representation of what actually happened. And additionally, even with from what I remember, this was brought up with when the mountains tremble discussion as well. There was a correction in the documentary that was re-released, and this was particularly because the translator intentionally misinterpreted some of the accounts. And one observation that I made, particularly when I mean, when we were talking about the translator having his own subtitles, is Wise does a 180-degree flip of this in some of, I mean, in some or most of their documentaries. They cut out the translator's question, and the the interviewer is seen asking an English the question in English, and the interviewee is in some sense responding in their own native tongue. It in addition to uh, being objective, it also brings a sense of authenticity.
I think Nikhil,
Uh,
you did the right word, because I think as a uh, prospective research student, you would
Mhm.
understand it. The fact
Mhm.
that uh, if there is a document, it has to be authentic. This film is supposed to be a document, and it has to be authentic. So I agree with you. I think it's very
No,
important.
authenticity in the sense of from the point of view of listening to the actual people speak and in their own native tongue, and
That
it's
is
not the translators.
that
Yeah.
is so from such a polished. I mean, when you look at this film, it's a very polished film. I think that not polished, sorry, polished film.
Mhm.
So I think that call must not have been a difficult one. But this, I think the idea to use the translator throughout, showing her on screen, I think that is a different uh, beast altogether.
um, for me, at least, if I go ahead with it, uh, it the presence of the translator also signified the presence of the other person who was present. The Apart from the person being interviewed, who is Claude Lanzmann himself, and one
Mhm.
we do see him again and again in the documentary, and he is a large presence in the documentary. Uh, Whether he's trying to encourage the victims to talk more, or whether he's trying to ask more details from the perpetrators themselves. And for me, at least, it does provide a more subjective view from the perspective of the filmmaker. We are like standing with him at that moment, and we are waiting for the translator's message. We don't know what has been said, and there's a we're just waiting for it. And it for me, it seems to be a very subjective touch, especially because this is quite an artistic documentary, as mentioned before, and it has it doesn't seek to, what do you say, educate the viewer on something which we don't know.
Why do you
It
think so?
Because it does what do you say, go through a lot of details of
Mhm.
what happened,
Mhm.
but it is something that has been seeped into all of us, because at least people were aware of the Holocaust, people are aware of what went on in it, and uh,
But
like
this is a
it's
visual education in a very direct sense. Huh?
I didn't get that.
This is a direct visual education. We are getting to see what actually happened and the places where it
That's
happened.
That's actually a good segue into the next point. But uh, what do we actually see? We do this again. Showa is famous for not showing any archive footage. We only
Hmm.
see people talking the whole documentary,
Hmm.
and that is our only source of information.
Hmm.
And with regards to authenticity, again, it is only people talking, and the only type of record which we do see is the log tables for the trains,
Hmm.
and we only see the people talking, and that in a sense creates for me at least it, it makes it far more personal when you see the people talking, when you see the victims talking, obviously. And obviously Claude Lanzmann kinds of corroborates their experiences through editing. He brings in the story elements a little bit, and
Hmm.
we also see um the condescension of the perpetrators, and even they in a way kind of corroborate what happened inside the camps. There was the conditions were horrible, and it was just full of dead bodies everywhere, and just people speaking is the only it's like a witness box. They're like they are our only source of information right now. We don't see any pictures of dead bodies. We don't see any pictures of the death camps. We only see the ruins of the death camps,
Hmm.
and and that is definitely a far more subjective view. Trying to make us uh, see it from their eyes instead of from another camera's eyes.
No, I didn't really understand. Are you generalizing it? Because
No, no,
every
no. Because
documentary or every book is a subjective point of view.
yeah, obviously uh, that is true. But with I was maybe talking with regards to its claims of authenticity, right? We
Mm.
only hear people speaking, and uh, how uh, how do we know whether this is as we don't have any direct proof like evidence from the document itself that these things happened.
Okay. One, particularly about the lack of footages. One thing what I can infer is he wanted to step away from what I understand. There were two. I mean, the Allied and Axis powers uh, mostly produced documentaries, especially during the wartime, to gain public support. And Vishal, you can correct me if I'm wrong anyway here. I mean, both of you, not just Vishal. Vishal is the guy. You can correct me. So, The Eternal Jew, which is a very monumental documentary from the Nazi regime, and there was one right after Pearl Harbor. This was particularly in the United States, which in some sense pushed the public opinion towards putting the Japanese people in not really concentration camps, but in labor camps because they were in some sense pushed away. And usage of any of these footages would need an interpretation of what it implied. And giving an interpretation is taking a subjective stance, which I suppose the documentary tried to avoid from the first minute it started out. I mean, this was my understanding, but again, you did not really have corpses when it started filming. So, I mean, this is purely my understanding, but uh, you can feel free to contradict.
Uh, I do not have anything to add to that, but yeah, I guess this is a good point to move the discussion to the next big stylistic trait, and like the
I
fact
wanted to
that
also hear what Vishal thought of what is that.
No, it's a very conscious decision to not use those footages because he's I think he's also trying to create. So let's say this 9 hour long documentary,
Mm-hmm,
and he might probably not have footages for every section of the film, which makes
mm-hmm,
it inconsistent. That is one thought. Uh, Also, uh, he is going for a particular mood. So maybe that was a stylistic choice that I will not use anything from the past because I don't think uh, the only thing that he has used is recreation with those miniature figures.
mm-hmm.
So I think it was a conscious decision not to use it. I think he wanted to create this world in front of us through these stories. So
I think once it crosses the 4 hour mark, the director and the editor, gives up and they have an I don't care attitude. Let it go to 15 hours, 20 hours for all. Like
no, but
that was
you,
just a joke.
you
Okay.
want no, no, I understand what you're saying, but and it might be true for a lot of filmmakers, but when you're when prop, I mean, doesn't look like he's Cloud Lanzmann will take take that role. Also, I think
Mm-hmm.
once you started with a idea, though, you make sense that you go through with it. If you've not used it for 4 hours, then you're not going to use it further on.
True.
And there was probably a conscious. I'm not really sure what his idea was. Sorry, what his thoughts were about the existing footages were.
Mm-hmm.
Because who shot them and what were they portraying? All these questions will arise. Secondly, I
Mm-hmm.
think he wanted to paint a picture through these people, not through the existing images. So that was a conscious choice, and then we have to ask this question: Did we feel that we needed those images? So that may be again a personal, in terms of an audience of, it's just a personal thought, a, a personal connect with the film, whether you felt that these existing footages were required or not. So maybe when
Mm-hmm.
the documentary started, I might have wanted to see some footages, but as the documentary moves ahead, I felt like no, I did not need any of that because it's my personal experience that there were moments where I just turned away from the screen, even though there was no gore on the screen itself, but I had to turn away. Like I felt myself zoning out, not because I was bored. It's just I found it very difficult to sit through. It was it was hurting me. So uh, so if for me, if as an audience that is my reaction to it, then I don't really necessarily feel that I
Mm-hmm.
needed the footage. And in terms of style, if it didn't fit, it didn't fit. That is my answer regarding this question in terms of the stylistic choice. Whether or not it was the right thing to do, well, I mean, that depends.
True. Additionally, I wanted to make a remark about historiography. The one thing that immediately popped into my mind was Romila Thappar's take on historiography and how she feels an integration of all the interpretations is vital to get a more accurate sense of it. For example, um, especially during the 1900s, before the independence, um, the idea of India was mostly the narratives the colonialists pushed. And It took a lot of effort and a lot of multidimensional study to get a much better understanding of uh, the civilizations, the Indus Valley and the Gangetic civilizations that arose. And it was not merely the straightforward political history. It was also accounts from a lot of people, and it was also from religious texts. It was from archaeology. It also took various interpretations. For example, D.D. Kosambi is pretty famous for Marxist interpretation of history. And in some sense, Kritik is fair in um, holding Shoah to be an incomplete piece in history. I mean, in terms of understanding history, because yeah, you take the accounts of the people into consideration. You take the political history, you take the economics, you take pretty much everything and mix it up, and only then will you get an approximate sense of accurate history, or an approximate sense of actual history, not accurate but actual history. And this is why I also felt, right after I watched the documentary, this is why I felt the documentary is strong enough, and it's you know it's in some sense the best fit into the lineup. And by far, from all the documentaries and from all the films that I've watched in our curation list, this is the one that stood out for me. I
Oh
have
yeah.
an introspective
Hmm.
question, if I may, Kritik.
Go ahead, Nikhil.
So the whole idea of I mean, this is not directed to anyone, but it should, in some sense, act as an introspection for the entire club. Um, the whole idea of having a documentary, particularly about um, uh, a disaster, a catastrophe, if I may. So the whole idea of having it is to communicate it to people and to reach it to the audience, the as much audience as possible. But a 9 hour documentary might not really be digestible for a lot of people. So is it reserving it to the cinephile elite, or will is it? It's not really, in some sense, directly opening up to um the regular. I mean, I don't want to bifurcate, but uh, it's pretty evident. If you are acquainted with heavy films, if you are acquainted with watching films for, I mean, watching films that are longer than 4 hours, it these things. I mean, these films won't really challenge. I mean, these films are not as challenging as it is to a new person. I mean, a new viewer. Uh, so, since the goal was actually to reach out to the mass audience, and since it's a 9 hour documentary, aren't they inversely proportional to each other? I mean, this is merely an introspective question that I had. But I mean, this in no way should reflect future curation, because we are thinking of including more challenging films, and longer durations are one of the biggest challenges. But what are your thoughts on this? It it wants to reach out to the it wants to reach out to a lot of people, but at the same time, it's 9 hours long. How do you think that balances out?
Uh, I
I
believe
am not
Vishal.
sure whether
Hmm? I mean,
Yeah,
it's merely
Vishal,
an
go ahead.
introspective question. It's not directed to Kritik or Vishal or anybody in the club. It's just something that, you know, ran to my mind. And I think it is in some sense tangential, but uh, it, which is why if Kritik is okay with the question, we can continue having a discussion on that, or we can move on to the questions about the documentary.
No, because I think it's pretty important because why would anyone sit down and watch a documentary? I mean, and why should I watch a 9 hour documentary? Is one of the questions that should that I was asking myself. Why should anyone watch a 9 hour documentary? So yeah, I think this question is it's fair game. I believe whatever you said is still running around in my head.
I mean, once we watch the documentary, it's pretty evident why we should have watched it. But um, how would a new cinephile take that up?
No, I think the question is why did you join a film club? I mean, not you,
That's
Nikhil. I'm just saying generally. The question for
yeah, that's
everyone is
fair. That's fair. But Vishal, this
why
is
did
not just about
no
the film viewers. This is
no,
not just
because
about the people in the film.
there cannot be a universal answer. So I think what I'm trying to say is
Mhm,
if uh, everyone has joined the club with a purpose, which
mhm,
is irrespective of whatever we think
mhm,
regarding the quality of the film or the quality of the curation. Got nothing to do
mhm,
with that. Everyone has joined the club with a purpose.
mhm,
So, for example, for me, it was not really coming across great films. For me,
mhm,
it was taking part in uh, being in an environment where people are just talking about films, which is what I love. There might
mhm,
be people who have joined this club to explore interesting films. There might be some who are actually budding cinephiles or are cinephiles, and
mhm,
they just want to consume as much as possible.
mhm,
So this is the question that is doesn't have a simple answer. The question is, what does the club want to do? The club, do we cater to everyone? Then it's easy, just put out easy films. Um, as
No,
you
no,
rightly
Vishal.
said, when you
My
see the
question
film, no,
was.
when you see the film,
Mhm,
it's quite evident why you should have this film,
mhm,
right? So when a film is especially challenging, I think that is when you have to uh, take a call whether or not to recommend a particular film, because
mhm,
it's 9 hours long, so that is challenging. For example, I would never recommend a film like Evolution of a Filipino Family. I don't see any, in my way, I don't see anything that you get out of that film. It doesn't speak to me. But the same director made a 4 hour film, and I sat through it. I did not move. It was stunning. So
mhm,
uh, uh, longer duration is a challenge, but then the quality of the film and how important probably the film is. And for example, my thought is, you have this curation, like you have this theme. This
mhm,
film is in Without this film, the theme is incomplete. So
mhm,
if I had to choose one film, I would choose this film. For example, if I had to
mhm,
choose one film, and again, that's a personal thing. You might choose something else. If I have to choose one film, this is the film I would choose.
mhm.
So usually, why would you join a film club? Is to do something different from your normal life.
That's true.
So that is the job of the film club, to give them something different, or something that they might skip in their normal lives. So
Mhm,
I do not know. It's a good question to ask, introspective or as a rant, but
mhm,
it's not. It doesn't really have a straightforward answer. I think it's a multi-pronged answer, because there are different people have different expectations from the club. People have different hopes, not hopes, like they want different things from the club.
mhm. That's true. That's actually a very good answer.
Um, shall we move on to the next
Please,
point
please.
then?
Yes. Mm.
Yeah, I was thinking about why Shoah is a difficult film. One, there's the subject matter itself. and there's the length also. And one of the qualities of Showa that really stuck with me was it's it has no kind of strict narrative, and it's kind of non chronological in nature.
Mhm.
When I was watching it, I was very shocked, and even at the end of the film, like we get no kind of closure or any kind of, obviously I don't we cannot expect any kind of catharsis
Mhm.
uh, from the documentary itself, from just reading the synopsis of the documentary, but we don't get any kind of closure, and it leaves us with a very it at least left me with a very bitter feeling. And,
Mhm.
uh, why do you guys think this film was made in a non-chronological format? Because it could have easily been a film from date A to date B.
Mm, I felt it wanted to imply a certain sense of uh, prototype. Um, with the Rwanda documentary that we have here, with a different documentary. I can't recall the name. It's actually an Al Jazeera or a Channel 5 documentary. Um, it talks about how there are certain elements that propagate. Um, I mean, the certain set of checklists that um, imply a genocide is coming. And the documentary took the narrative, I mean, took the structure of the checklist and made it into a documentary and uh, placed the set of historical events in such a way that it reflected, it ran parallelly with the checklist. And it seemed like Lanzmann also, in some sense, wanted to um, explore a sense of universality in what happened, the with the Holocaust, with the elements that led to uh, the Jewish condition in the Nazi regime. That was my thought on it.
And Vishal,
I am not really sure. What do you get? As in, so coming back to my personal experience with the film, like I did not feel the need for it to be, it to go from A to B. Uh, Plus, I think he had a structure in mind,
Mhm.
and he worked with that structure, and that structure worked for me. As in, I can't really enumerate the structure. As in, it was.
hello, am I audible?
Yeah, yeah, you're good.
Um,
I got a call. Sorry. So it was. So as I said, like it was my personal experience that I didn't feel the need for it to go from A to B, because that's what usual documentaries would do. I think he wanted to do away with that because then it's just fact. It's just a piece of fact, and there is probably there is some value to having a discussion which is not merely a piece of fact. So that might have been his thought. I did not feel the need for it to go from A to B, but it's quite valid that you might feel disappointed if that was not the chronology that you got, but that you were expecting and you didn't get it.
just to clarify myself, I, I was not. looking for a chronological structure or any kind of narrative, but I'm just trying to think about why he took this decision. And it is, especially as a documentary filmmaker, it is it's quite a it's quite an odd decision to make it non-chronological, and especially when you're just dealing with uh, individual the stories of individuals instead of the story of a community of people. It seems as, and I was trying to think about
Maybe one thing that might have happened is because it's a 9 hour long documentary. He did not want people to go through this chronology wherein, oh, I will co- I want I will check out the ending section because that's when he'll talk about the end. So he wanted people to sit through it. Maybe that is the reason he did not work through a
Tricking people
chronology.
into learning.
Correct. That's probably the right way to describe it. Because there are sometimes filmmakers don't have a blank screen at the end credit. They will have, like, if this character is walking away, they will just the character is walking away, and then you will have the end credits. But because there's a visual on screen, you will just sit and watch and maybe catch a few names. So though it's not doing anything to the story is over, but you'll sit and watch those few names. So maybe that might have been, see, as in, I didn't feel the need, but he might have done it on purpose just so that people sit through and don't come at XYZ point to check XYZ aspect of
Mhm.
the storytelling.
I felt it was mostly to illustrate a sense of etherealness with the emotions of the survivors. Uh, for example, it happened um, uh, 65, 70, 85 years ago. And the documentary was made when? About 10 or 15 years later, right?
yeah, the documentary was started in the 70s. It took like 11
Ah,
years to make.
11 years. So 70s, 80s. So, despite a shift in decades, you still have a sense of connection. For example, Vishal told us about how difficult it was for him to sit through uh, some of the segments. And somehow the emotion has lived on through the documentary, despite it aging for what, 85, 90, 100 years. And as Vishal pointed out, it will live as long as cinema is alive. And to extend that, I feel it will hurt people as long as people are capable of being hurt.
Um, for this is one of like this point is really fascinates me, and as this decision to make this document in this form, and it seems in a way to it kind of adds to the documentary's mystery in of itself.
Hmm.
It's you cannot. It's quite difficult to describe the documentary in itself, and I think the same can be said about the Holocaust itself. And there are a lot of explanations for it. The explanation is I remember from I was a little bit of a history nerd, so the explanation which I generally heard in documentaries is that the Jews were not dying fast enough in the concentration camps, so they built death camps. And then you learn about the other thing, which is that they wanted to what is it, the final solution for the Jews. And there are these various competing explanations for what happened. And uh, my guess is that I don't think these it is quite satisfactory to to explain the deaths of 6 million plus people, 6 million plus Jews, and
Hmm.
and kind of avoiding this, and by avoiding this a narrative, he kind of avoids explaining what happens, and he can just focus on the details. You know, and in doing that, he gets a very different kind of historical document.
Hmm.
And at least that's how far I have reached into it. And also,
No, I
in a
didn't
way,
understand what you're trying to say.
what I was trying to say is, everyone knows. I mean, we know about the Holocaust. There are explanations as to why it happened, right? Whether it was the anti-Semitism, or whether it was just they just wanted to clear out the concentration camps, or whether they wanted to purify the human race, and
Hmm.
whatever, whatever.
It was all done by the Illuminati.
Yes, that is one reason or explanation we cannot rule out entirely.
Um, that's a
Illuminati
theory.
and aliens.
I would say that's a theory and not an explanation of why it happened. Like, why would the Illuminati do it? The answer to that would be an explanation, right?
Um, One tiny correction, if I may.
Hmm.
Usually in the regular nomenclature, an explanation is a hypothesis, and it doesn't really carry strong, evidential backing. But a theory does, which is why a theory is an explanation of, evidential explanation of something, and a hypothesis is, a scenario that could be or could not be proven.
Um, I understand that.
I think
Those
we
are
should
the
come back. We should come back to the film.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
uh,
yeah.
yeah, and anyways, just to wrap up, because you asked me to explain myself better. I think in doing this in this deliberately kind of confusing manner, he avoids any
Mhm.
simple explanations of what went down, and
That's true. Mhm.
and
I agreed. I think that is very valid and probably the best response to your own question. Actually,
Mm.
yeah, that's why I like being a moderator. I get to give questions that I have the best answers to.
Right now,
But
you gave the best answer to the question that you had before.
that's why
um,
I don't moderate because I have no questions. I'm as in I
I
have
think you're just
questions,
being
but I
modest
don't. I have questions, but I feel like oh these are all stupid questions. So
here.
that's why I
No,
don't
I
moderate.
think you're just being modest here. But additionally,
Not really, but
um,
let's continue with the discussion.
sure. Um, there was one additional, with the idea of 6 million Jews being massacred. When I heard it, it seemed like an unfathomable number, and it seemed like it was too far away from the truth. But once I started to understand how, within a span of just 100 days, close to 1 million Tutsis were killed, and with machetes, and they didn't really. So their philosophy was they didn't want to waste bullets on Tutsis, and just with machetes and coordinated Hutu effort. The uh, uh, the broadcasting channels, the government, law enforcement, and even the religious leaders, they were all in it to exterminate the Tutsis. And within a span of 100 days, if uh, people with machetes are capable of killing 1 million million Tutsis, then it doesn't seem like it doesn't seem all that impossible for a more coordinated effort and a more technologically advanced society to kill 6 million Jews. I mean,
Um,
this was yeah.
no,
Go ahead,
finish
go
your
ahead.
point, please.
No,
No,
no, no,
finish
I'm
your
done.
point. I will.
No, I'm done.
One thing at the start of part one that really
Mhm,
stuck with me was how they constantly tried to hide what is going on inside there in these factories of death, as it is said. And apart from it having a quite strategic kind of
mhm,
purpose where they could
mhm,
uh,